All right, welcome back for part 2 of Photoshop selections, the basics. So we just selected this gauge with the magic wand and moved it into our other file. And, we can move this thing around. By the way, if you haven't noticed, when you have the Move tool selected, there is an auto select option up here on the control panel at the top. Usually you want that to be on because you can just click on any object and it will select the layer for you automatically and move it. If this is off, it will only move the contents of the currently selected layer, which in this case right now is the face layer, right? So auto select is a nice kind of convenience, allows you to very quickly select the object in front of you, and it chooses the layer that it's on and saves you some time. Okay, I'm going to jump back to this to the gauge file, and you're going to notice it's still selected. The marching ants are still there, and it took a little bit of work to make this selection, and I don't want to lose it. So I'm going to go up to the select menu. Remember, there's an entire menu just for selections. And near the bottom of all these options is the Save Selection option. And this is kind of a smart thing to do when you've made a fairly elaborate selection and you don't want to have to do it again. Select Save Selection, and it's going to tell you, the destination, the same document, although you can change it to another document if you wanted to, right? Or put it in a new document. And it's going to create a new channel. We haven't messed around with channels much. And if you wanted to, you could give it a name, although I'm not going to give it a name this time. So the destination for our selection is going to be a new channel, right? So I'm going to click OK. Now, down here next to layers, there's a whole panel just devoted to channels. Now, channels are kind of the building blocks of the images that we're working with, these bitmaps. And you're going to notice we've got an RGB channel at the top. This is the composite channel that you click, you click on when you want to see the entire image in full color. But there is a red channel with just the red pixels, a green channel with just the green pixels, and a blue channel with the blue pixels. All right. And so all of those channels, the RGB channels, if you click here on the RGB composite at the top, it shows you the whole thing in full color. But you can isolate a particular channel to work on it individually if you ever needed to. Well, down here at the bottom, there's a new channel that we just created. It's called Alpha 1. This is an alpha channel, and you can take selections, save them as a new channel. That's an alpha channel. In fact, I'm going to hit Command D to deselect, right? So you can see like it's basically a black and white channel. Everything that was selected is white, and everything that was not selected is black, right? Alpha channels, it's just a fancy place for you to store and modify selections. And when you're done modifying them, you can reload them. Look at the very bottom here. Let me zoom in. There's a Load Channel button down here at the bottom. Click on that, and your marching ants come back on the screen. So, in our advanced selections layer, we'll talk a little bit more about that. All right, so what's important here, anytime you mess around with your channels, say you go and you've saved a selection, you want to take a look at it as an alpha channel, it's important before you go back to messing around with your layers, that you click on this RGB composite channel at the top. What that does is it reveals all of the color channels and hides the alpha channel. Okay, and sometimes if you mess around with this, you're only looking at some color channels instead of all of them. You get kind of funky color results. So make sure you click on the RGB composite channel at the top, right? So that all those color channels are visible. Then you can go back to your layers panel. So I just wanted to point that out to you. So you may have noticed when we moved this gauge into the face layer, it was really large. And if I were to jump over to the face image, take a look at image size, I can see that my resolution is 150, about 600 pixels. Okay, 150. Remember that resolution. In fact, if I look at it in inches, that might help you kind of visualize that. 150 at 4.5 inches. Okay. So if I look at the gauge image, if I go and look at its image size, its resolution is 300, which is much higher resolution. So what I'm going to do is just experiment here. I'm going to lower the resolution to 150, which is the same as the face image. All right. And so I'm reducing the size of the file. And you can see on the screen it gets smaller. And so now I'm going to, take that same selection and drag it over to the face image, and the gauge will be kind of more of a moderate size because it shares the same resolution. Well, anyway, here's the thing. When you resize something, if you had a selection made, it's gone. It goes bye-bye. So, but fortunately, we were smart and we saved our selection, right? Watch this. Go back to the select menu. Choose Load Selection. Remember, it was the Alpha 1 channel that we saved. I'm going to click OK. And the selection comes back. Can you see that? Let me zoom in. Voila. All right, so I'm going to grab the Move tool and drag this over here again. Drop it. This time it's going to be smaller. See that? By the way, remember layers? You can reposition layers. Just grab that layer and drag and drop it. Remember, you can name layers. If I double click where it says layer 1 here, I'll call this gauge 1. And double click layer 2 and call that gauge 2. Excuse me. All right. There we go. We got a couple of gauges. We got a happy face. It's a rather surreal psychedelic image here. Hey, remember, layers have opacity. Like I can lower the opacity of that layer, see through it. And I can change the blending mode, right? Which is just a fancy way of dealing with opacity and transparency. I kind of like linear light on that one. Maybe lower the opacity a touch. Okay, so we've made some selections with the magic wand, with the marquee tools. Let's turn our attention to some other selection tools, shall we? Let's go jump over here to the lure image, lure.tiv. And I'm going to take a look at making a selection with the Lasso tool. Okay, so L is the shortcut for the Lasso tool, and this lets you kind of make freehand selections. Okay, and so I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, Move myself over. Remember, the space bar gives you the hand tool, and you can move yourself around once you've zoomed in. Now with the lasso tool, like say I'm going to select the front end of this, and if I try to do this with a mouse, let's see. So I click, I'm going to follow the edge here. This is really not the best tool for selecting something as complex as the front end of a fishing lure. You can see about now I'm regretting having that third cup of coffee, and I'm really butchering this. And you know, my hand is starting to cramp up now. It's not easy to do. Okay. There we go. How's that? This is not the best way to use this tool. The lasso tool is really better for making edits to an existing selection, okay? Or isolating an area, kind of a rough, quick selection that can then be modified by another tool. So, like for instance, I could, isolate the front end like that with the lasso to kind of, zone in on a particular area, and then I can modify this selection. Say I could grab the magic wand tool now, and if I hold down the Option key, remember the Option key will subtract. If I click on that white area, it's now subtracted that background. Right? So I've isolated the head and subtracted the background with another tool. Right? Okay, so but let's take a look at the other lasso tools. There's the polygonal lasso tool, and this allows you to click from point to point to point, which, on a curvilinear object like this is really not the best tool. In certain areas that are more geometric it kind of works, but it's really not meant to select anything that's not more geometric in nature. Like you can very quickly select, rectangular things with this thing all day long, right? Or, polygonal stuff, right? But not curvilinear stuff. Now, here's another one. The magnetic lasso, which allows you to click near the edge of an object, and it kind of snaps to the edge and makes little points along that path. So you might be thinking, hey, this is great. You can even click to add a path in a particular spot. The trouble with this is it's not as accurate as you think it might be. It tries, but to tell you the truth, I don't use it very much simply because I can get better results with other tools. But hey, if you can make it work, great. But you can see like it kind of butchers things. It doesn't do a very good job. Now you can hit the delete key on the keyboard or the backspace and back up, and it removes those points. You see that? But still, it's really not my favorite selection tool. But it exists, right? And if you double click, it'll finish the selection. All right, so those are the lasso tools. Let's try, I'm going to zoom out a bit here, Command 0. There's a couple more tools that you should know about. And like one is the quick selection tool. And this combines a brush with the magic wand, right? And I don't know if you can see this or not, but if you use the bracket keys on the keyboard, I'm hitting the right bracket key. See how it makes your brush larger? The left bracket key will make it smaller. Now watch this. As long as your brush size, let me zoom in again here. as long as your brush size is within the object that you're selecting, and you click and drag, it's almost like using a brush to make a selection, right? I can click and drag, and as long as I don't, like, look what happens when I stray out here into the white background. Oh, I got something I didn't want. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. But as long as I keep my brush small enough, it'll work. Now, these little loops over here, doesn't matter how hard I try, it always selects the white inside that loop. But I can hold the Option key down and subtract things as well. So if I hold down Option, I can subtract that. See that? Okay, so again, keep your brush size small enough so that you're within the boundaries of the object you're selecting. I'm going to zoom back out here, Command 0. And now I'm in a larger area. I can actually increase the size of my brush. I can click and drag, and eventually Photoshop just knows what I'm going to select, and it'll kind of finish very quickly. Now once again, on the other side, I have to reduce the size of my brush, kind of click a few spots. Okay. And once again, if I hold down the Option key, I can subtract that little white bit in the center of that loop. Okay. All right. So there you have it. Now, that's a pretty sophisticated way of making a selection, and it did a pretty good job. But I want to point out to you guys that the reason it's working so well is because Uncle Byron already cut this thing out and put it on a white background for you, right? So in the real world, if you photograph something and there's a more sophisticated, like more complex background, it's not going to be this easy. All right. So check this out. If I were to take this selection, I'm going to get the Move tool. I'm going to drag my selection over here to the face image and drop it. Okay, and so I want to take a look at the edge, because the edge is so important. I'm going to zoom in here. It's not the best edge in the world, right? I've got these white pixels along the outer edge from the background, like picked up some background pixels. You see that even along the edge here. I've got some stray pixels, and it's kind of jagged. It's not super smooth. So listen, like, if you want your stuff to be taken seriously, you've got to clean these things up. So what I'm going to do is come back to my lure image, and with any selection tool active, I'm going to go back to the quick selection tool. With any selection tool active and a selection is made, look up here on the control panel. There is the select and mask option. You see that? Now, this is a way to edit and kind of modify the edge of a selection. I do want to point out to you, under the select menu, there are ways of modifying an existing selection. You can create a border from a selection. You can smooth that selection, expand it, contract it, feather it. In this case, I want to use the select and mask option up here. So when you click on this, it opens up a dialog box. And over here on the right-hand side, there's properties. This is a really big dialog box, right? So I can preview the changes that I'm making. In fact, I can hit Command plus to zoom in to see that edge a little better. Okay, so check this out. It's important that you choose the right view, and in this case, I'm viewing this image on black, because the background was already white. So if I view it on white, I can't really see the difference. So I'm viewing it on black. Now there's the overlay, setting as well, but I'm going to choose on black, and you can actually increase the opacity. of that kind of preview. It's kind of darkening the background so I can see the edge more clearly. All right, check this out. I can smooth my selection here. I can increase the contrast so the edge is sharper. I can feather it, but that'll soften it and make it really kind of marshmallowy. And that's not, I mean, Allure is kind of a hard object. So, feathering things, softening the edge. Sorry, I got the wrong thing. That was smooth, wasn't it? Okay, I'll smooth it just a little bit. No feather. Increase the contrast to make the edge a little sharper. And now look at this. I can shift the edge. If you scroll down, you can shift the edge to the interior. That way, it's going to remove some of those extra pixels along the outer edge. See that? So I can expand it outward and get more of them, but in this case, I want less. So I'm going to shift the edge to the interior. Click OK. I've modified that selection now, cleaned it up a bit. I'm going to move it over here to the face image. And you can see it's a little cleaner, a little smoother. It's not absolutely perfect, but it's a lot better than it was. Okay? All right. So, oh yeah, by the way, I was going to point out to you, if your selection is on a background that's more noisy like this, it's going to be a lot harder to select, right? If I go to select this, it's going to be a little tougher. Anyway, one last thing I want to show you here, and that is there's a brand spanking new tool grouped with Quick Select and Magic Wand. It's called the Object Selection Tool. And it's supposed to help you pick things out from a background and select it pretty easily. Now, in previous versions of Photoshop, there was the Select Subject option, and this still works pretty great. There's just a tool for it now. So if I click on Select Subject, it picks the subject out pretty well, right? I might still have to clean this up a bit, and it may have missed a little bit on the loops here. Yeah, it's not perfect on loops. I would have to add to that. Like, well, this is a good opportunity for me to show you that in action. So if I get the Lasso tool out, this is really what the Lasso does. Well, I can hold down the Shift key with the Lasso tool. Oh, I've got the wrong. Still have the magnetic lasso. I just want the good old-fashioned lasso tool. If I hold Shift down, remember Shift adds to a selection, so I can kind of loop around this area to add it into the selection. See that? So Shift, click and surround the area that you want to add. Or if you did something like this accidentally, you can hold down the Option or Alt key to subtract those pixels. Make sense? So adding and subtracting, Shift and Option Alt. Okay, so that does a pretty darn good job, right? I'm going to deselect that. Well, now there's a tool, right? The Object Selection tool. If you click and drag over that area, it does the same thing, right? So you can kind of isolate the thing that you want very quickly. You might think, oh, that's the answer to my prayers. But again, like if you're on a background like this and you try to do the same thing, it's not bad. It gets you kind of close, but like with the it's got the shadow, it's gotten this bit of negative space here. Again, I don't know if you can see that very well, but it's not a perfect selection this time because the background doesn't cooperate as much. So just keep that in mind. And again, if you're taking your own photographs, isolate the object on a simpler background and make these selection options a lot easier for you. Okay? All right, so there you have it. Basic selections, basic selection tools in Photoshop. Next time we'll do some more advanced work in isolating things, cutting them out. So look forward to that. All right, take care.